So I'm going to show you a hypothetical construct. These are plug-in numbers with make-believe players, just to show you one example of how this works in action. So we have here on the horizontal axis, we're going to look at financial returns, social returns, and on the vertical, financial returns. The first player coming in this example is the foundation. It's incurring the highest financial risk. Why? Because it is seeking primarily social impact. That's its mandate. It earns a 1% financial return, but a high social return in its judgment. Before the foundation invested, there was no money in the till. By virtue of the foundation's participation, you will see they will now shore up the capital structure of the venture and entice other players to join. Now we have a socially conscious investor. It might be an individual, it might be a business that comes in at the next layer. They're supportive of the social mission, but they want to have some financial return too. So we have a mixed objective. In this example, the mezzanine investor is going to get a 3% financial return and, of course, a piece of the social return to its credit. And then finally, we have a market-driven investor, doesn't give beans about the social impact. These are the guys we need to bring in. That's where the real money is. So we are able to give this market-driven investor what I'm calling a market rate return, 6% in this example. This venture will kick out, it is assumed, 4%. No great shakes. If we had a startup that was kicking out 4% on financial grounds alone, I don't think anyone in this room would invest. But here, everybody gets what they're after. And it's all because the foundation's money was used catalytically. But for the foundation, the private sector investors would not have been engaged. Who's a candidate? Any venture that is charitable or educational in this broadest of all senses. So when we talk about innovation within public health of various kinds, the L3C is a logical candidate. The venture must demonstrate that it's going to have consistent cash flow, not large cash flow, but predictable cash flow sufficient to meet its obligations to all of its stakeholders. And it needs to be entrepreneurial because of necessity. We're talking here about a startup or an early stage venture. I'm going to move from L3Cs to a different category, but still in the realm of how do we get the funding that we need for public health, for education, to alleviate poverty. By curing one, we're helping cure each of the others. And I'm going to be talking now about impact investing, which is a term of art greatly in parlance today, and lots of different players would describe themselves with this label. Here we're talking about financing that comes up front to produce targeted results. This is all about metrics, social metrics and financial metrics. The social metrics are not looking at the activities that are undertaken, but rather the outputs that are reasonable proxies for social impact. We're talking here about socially conscious investors, individuals, businesses, communities, governments that seek profits, not a dirty word even in the context of government. They need revenue. While funding programs with clear outcome measurements. That's the key. Without that, you've got nothing. And sustainable impact is achieved for those who benefit from the intervention, and you'll see these are interventions primarily, and for the community that is safer, more stable, and healthier. I'm going to talk about first the social impact bonds. This is a model you're going to be hearing a lot about within the course of the next year. As we speak, there is a grand total of 1 social impact bond in the world. What a social impact bond does is align interests of governments, private investors, and nonprofits around outcomes. Leverages private investment capital to pay for early intervention programs delivered by service providers. Government pays a variable return based upon the success of the intervention. And that variable return comes from the savings government achieves by virtue of the success of the program. It's a win-win. So long as the impact investor is prepared to bear the entrepreneurial risk, it costs government nothing. and indeed it saves government. Government does more with less. And the service providers that have no capital to be social petri dishes now have off-balance sheet financing for social innovation. Everybody wins, mostly all of us. I told you there was one example of a social impact bond in the world. Let me tell you about it. It is taking place right now in Peterborough, a small middle-class town outside of London. Peterborough has a prison. Not a prison by our terms exactly, because the offenders who reside there are there for a term of less than 1 year. So these are really misdemeanors in our language. They're young male offenders, however. And empirically, a funny thing has been discovered. 60% of the young men who are in Peterborough prison will find their way back into Peterborough prison within a year. This is an unconscionable result. Rockefeller Foundation and others said, look, we think we know what's going wrong here. We think it's because the young men who are coming out of Peterborough prison in their last stages within the institution, when they re-enter the community, when they rejoin their families, don't have appropriate support services to maximize their success. They don't know how to get a job. They don't know how to react to those around them. So Rockefeller said, hey, let's do this. We will fund what we believe to be the best service providers in the various relevant areas, give these guys a helping hand, a chance to succeed, a chance to stay out of Peterborough prison. If we're right, governments share the savings with us. If we're wrong, we'll lose our money. Right now, we're in the midst of this trial, so I can't tell you the results yet. But this is thought leadership at its very best. What we have here is a futures contract on social outcomes. This is going to be the wave of the future for social enterprise financing. In the U.S., we already have 2 federal agencies developing their own pay-for-success programs, which are the U.S. version of social impact bonds. The Department of Justice and Department of Labor. We also have Minnesota and Massachusetts working on their own versions. Illinois, where the governor has appointed me chairman of a task force on social innovation, we're going to have one pretty quick too. I can tell you as well, my firm is replicating this approach in a non-governmental way, purely through transactions that replicate, that mirror this very strategy. So to the extent we don't have to wait for governments, we can avoid the costs of government, we can avoid the bureaucracy of government, excuse me. We're doing that immediately, and we already have some of those programs underway. What programs are likely candidates? These are interventions, and I'm identifying a few of them. Some you will see are directly health-related. All of them, I would argue, are at least indirectly health-related. All of these have features where you can have a discrete population, you can have a test program based upon an innovative strategy. The intervention will either work or not work by some empirical standard within a finite period of time. It is fundable by people who call themselves impact investors. Lots of other examples are coming into the fore. These are some that we're currently playing with. What impact investing can do for healthcare? We spend $2.6 trillion on treating illness. Could investing in people, rather than treatment, help us redirect some of that money toward preventing the underlying program? That's the nature of the social impact bond. By the way, that's also the nature of the L3C. By the way, that's also the nature of the Benefit Corporation, the Flexible Purpose Corporation, the Social Purpose Corporation, the Sustainable Purpose Corporation. All the states are now developing their own emerging forms, strategies, tactics, capital formation techniques around these very issues. Here's some examples. Nothing magical about any of them, but just to stimulate your thinking. High impact, high return health financing strategies, all built around this notion. The health impact bond, clearly this is the social impact bond, but where we're dealing with evidence-based health interventions. and we're dealing with a share of savings return. Nobody loses any money this way. The impact investor is placing a bet because of the importance of the issue to the impact investor. Governments or donors or others who gather around funding, should these benefits prove successful, are doing so because they're sick of funding charities on the strength of high hopes and good intentions. They want to wait till there's some result and something works. Then they say, I'll be in reserve. Call on me. I will fund that outcome. Alternative financing structures, risk and gain sharing, healthcare cost swaps, mutual health organizations, reinsurance products, risk and use of reserve investment toward prevention. All I'm really talking about here are taking financial products that have been in the marketplace for generations and tweaking them so they become high impact, high return instruments with health outcomes specifically in mind. Health credit exchange based on a carbon credit markets. The task force that I chair in Illinois has as its charge, look at what's being done in other states. Look what's being done in other parts of the economy. Look what's being done in other countries. Import them. Make Illinois the hub of social innovation. I give you the same opportunity. Make the United States the hub of health innovation. Why not? So here's another model we can borrow. There have been some missteps in that market. We know what they are. We can learn from them. We could take the best of that market, import it into the healthcare situation, and create stakeholders who have an economic interest in driving this agenda. Social determinants pharmacy prescribes public and private sector resources to address upstream social and environmental health issues. It's gimmicky but substantive. Often it's about the positioning of these issues. It's about the language that's used, because every stakeholder needs to be reached out to on his, her, or its own terms. The value proposition, whether financial, social, or both, needs to be particularized for that specific audience. When I talk to a government official here, when I talk to a big business official here, when I talk to somebody who's a physician here, or everybody else who's here, you're looking at this through your own lens. The trick is to harmonize those discrete objectives and even fiduciary obligations so that we're all pulling in the same directions, because it is equally important to all of us. Collective financing, again, these are all things coming to the fore. That should say crowdfunding, group purchasing, co-ops, microfinance, social enterprise development funds. These are all in place right now. All we have to do is turn these onto a health spin, and we're already there. So I think I'm slightly ahead of time.